Their friends were shocked by you. Archangel Michael says, the night remembers what the day tries to forget. The corridor of air held its breath as the message touched your doorstep, crisp like a leaf that refused to crumble. Somewhere a clock marched forward, but the room around you moved like honey. The window learned your outline before the mirror knew it. Silence pressed its ear to your walls, listening for the tremor that often arrives before a change. The darkness did not threaten, it simply waited with practiced patience. Someone had already spoken your name in a tone too careful to be casual. Footsteps that were not yours crossed old ground and raised new dust. A rumor put on a coat and walked into the world like an actor ready for opening night. In another neighborhood the lights shivered when your memory entered the conversation. Two friends paused at the mouth of an alley, hands hovering over words they were not ready to release. A secret leaned on the brick and smiled without teeth. Type Amen 333 to get blessing. The first wave landed where you least expected. A phone shuddered on a table, spilled a line, and called your presence into rooms you had never stepped inside. Faces tilted, and something delicate loosened under the ribs. They saved your photo and stared as if it might blink. They measured the story by the strength of the ache it left behind. The air of that cafe tasted like new paper and ink that refused to dry. A chair scraped, deliberate and slow. A glass clinked, and the sound tallied the names of those who had ever underestimated you. The street outside bent a little, making space for the turn that was coming. One of them had been the loudest before tonight. One of them swore often that nothing shook him, but the syllables of your name found the place his voice avoided. Around his mouth, surprise gathered like a bruise that would not show until morning. Type Amen to get blessing 333. Archangel Michael says, a tide never asks the shore for permission. The room inside their heads filled with echoes, replaying the moment you stepped through a door that opened like a revelation. They could not return to the minute before that sight. At a rooftop party where the music wore silver shoes, your name arrived without an invitation. It moved from lip to lip, and with every retelling the shape grew brighter. No one could hold eye contact with the truth for long. They remembered how you stood, the way calm dressed your shoulders with quiet authority. Even your silence carried a steady pulse, like a hidden engine built by patient hands. The unspoken details did not fade, they hardened. Someone poured a drink that tasted expensive and set it down untouched. Someone laughed at the wrong time, and the laugh stood between them and refused to leave. They watched the door, expecting you to appear again, and the door enjoyed their hope. Type Amen 111 to get blessing on a narrow lane lit by strings of golden bulbs. Two of your oldest critics leaned in to share a story. The story failed to sit still, wriggling under their grip like a live wire. The more they spoke, the more they realized their sentences were passengers. They remembered the day they mistook you for small and neat. They remembered the afternoon your courage unfolded like a long letter arriving late but right on time. They could not deny the way the room recalibrated to your rhythm. Every window on that street watched them fail to make light work of your shadow. The night itself changed posture, spine straight and attentive. Even the cats did not argue with the wind when it carried your afterglow. A city breathes for millions, yet a single breath can change its weather. Your step sent a hush across stone and steel, and the hush became the stage. They were there for the moment, and the moment was not there for them. Type Amen now 333 for blessing at the house with the lemon tree. A circle gathered where the floor remembered older dances. Someone spread photos on the carpet like little doors. When they opened one, the room inhaled. They argued about the moment you decided the ground would no longer tell you how high to climb. A promise stirred the curtains and then settled on a chair as if listening. The night nodded, satisfied with the honesty of the air. Someone said your courage tasted like mint and iron. Someone else said it sounded like metal cooling after a forge. None of them touched the truth lightly, because the truth carried weight that asked for two hands. They had never seen a decision wear such grace. They had never seen fear volunteer to leave without a scene. They had never measured a person by what they refused to surrender until they measured you. Type Amen 333 to get blessing in the slow hours before dawn. A car idled behind a grocery store. Two friends inside kept their faces turned away from the rear view. Your name hung between them like frost that never melts from the inside out. They wondered if they had taken you for a room with a low ceiling. They realized you were a cathedral with quiet wings. The shock pressed in where their doubt had slept for years. They thought of the day you carried your silence like a lantern. You did not need to announce the light for it to work. It found them anyway and asked nothing in return. Another memory surfaced, the one where you walked past the line and did not look back. A door closed behind you and became a wall for those who hesitated. They remembered promising each other that nothing would change, and then everything changed. Type Amen to get blessing 333 now. Archangel Michael says, a turning point never dresses in noise. Even the street lamps understood that tonight belonged to aftermaths. When the sun took attendance, your name answered for itself. At a family table where the varnish gleamed like a lake, someone repeated the latest detail. Someone else tried to fold it into something smaller and failed. The details refused to shrink to fit their expectations. They imagined your hands steady on a future that did not tremble. They imagined your voice poured into a room and filling every corner without overflow. They could not imagine returning to the version of themselves that underestimated you. A cousin who had smiled politely for years pressed a palm to his chest as if holding still a storm. The steam from his tea blurred the pattern of the wallpaper. He blinked, and the pattern rearranged into the shape of your initials. Type Amen 333 and receive blessing. News moved across the city like a train that did not stop at every station. People who owed you silence finally kept it. People who owed you truth found it heavier but cleaner than they expected. In a studio apartment with a slanted ceiling, a woman you once helped kept replaying your kindness. The replay grew new colors every time, and those colors matched the courage she borrowed from you. She messaged a friend and used a bright emoji to hide the tremble. On a bench near a closed fountain, an old friend balanced grief and pride in the same palm. The palm did not shake. It simply learned a new weight distribution. He closed his eyes and saw the hallway where you first told him you would not stay small. He thought of how often they had shrugged at your certainty. He thought of how certainty thrives without applause. He finally admitted that the applause had been a substitute for attention, and you never needed either. Type Amen for blessing 333. The block where you once stumbled became a classroom for everyone who watched. The mistake that had been paraded before others dissolved into a source of heat that softened iron. Even the stones remembered the rhythm of your second beginning. They spoke of the day you chose the long road without a witness. They spoke of the breakfast where you swallowed doubt and washed it down with resolve. They spoke until the words fell away, and what remained was the throb of respect. At a bus stop with a broken timetable, a teenager wrote your initials on the fogged plastic. He had heard the story in fragments, and each fragment clicked into a pattern. He would not forget the pattern when he needed it most. Someone said the city was different now. Someone said it had always been the same and you were the one who changed. The truth rested between these claims like a coin that did not need to be flipped. Type Amen 333 to unlock blessing. A woman who had once dismissed your vision packed a small suitcase of apologies. She would never unpack them in front of you, but she would carry the weight with purpose. The weight was not a punishment, it was an education. Another friend scrolled through old texts and found the exact moment he should have stood beside you. He saved the screenshot and promised to match the depth of the people he loved. That promise wore steel and velvet. At the old cinema with the flickering bulb, your initials appeared in a list of community donors. The bulb seemed to flicker less beneath those letters. People around the sign smiled like they had been let in on a quiet victory. They bought tickets, and the movie did not matter. What mattered was the gravity that steadied the floor when your name lit the frame. They went home with a new standard pressed into their pockets. Type Amen to get blessing 333. Please. Across the river, a band practiced in a garage with its door rolled up. The guitarist added a small refrain inspired by a story about you. The refrain made the bridge stronger. The drummer tapped out a rhythm that remembered your cadence. The bass line arrived low and sure as if it had rehearsed beside your footsteps. The singer added a lyric that did not mention you, and somehow every ear heard you anyway. Music traveled farther than gossip that night. It cut across avenues and stitched neighborhoods together. It left behind a hush that sounded like someone learning to listen. Two strangers danced under a string of white lights. They were not careful with their joy, and the street was glad for it. Somewhere within that gladness your name glowed, steady and unhurried. Type Amen 333 for a blessing. Near the market where oranges piled like small suns, your old neighbor told a vendor she had always known. The vendor nodded, sold an extra fruit, and tucked resilience into the paper bag like a gift. The neighbor smiled and said the taste would linger. A pair of twins argued over who had called it first. Their laughter braided itself into a rope strong enough to pull a small doubt out of the road. They left behind a little flag announcing that they understood you now. A painter gathered the city into colors and left space where your presence should breathe. On the canvas, the sky bent slightly, not from pressure but from respect. The paint dried with a sheen that refused to look away. At home, you placed your keys on the hook that never fails you. The house recognized the signature of your day and aligned its corners accordingly. The walls hummed a lone note that belonged to you. Type Amen now to get blessing 333. They had not expected triumph to look like this. No fireworks, just the click of a door that closed on old noise. No speeches, just the sound of a steady kettle and a future that kept its promise. They had not expected humility to stand so tall. It did not perform, it simply anchored. Anchors do not shout, they hold. They had not expected peace to keep such good company with power. The balance made the floor feel new. New floors invite new steps, and you had plenty. Somewhere a group chat learned silence and practiced it well. Somewhere another group chat wrote your name and added a star. Motions became meanings. Type Amen 333 to receive a blessing in a studio lit by patient lamps. You placed a small card on a corkboard. The card held a word that knew the map of your heartbeat. Beside it, a photo from a distant day showed how far you had traveled without leaving yourself behind. You adjusted a frame so that the picture sat level. The level felt like a promise you could keep. The promise did not depend on luck, only on the rhythm you had already chosen. The city leaned toward the window and smiled with you. Your reflection returned the smile with something extra, something earned. The extra looked like a horizon without edges. A friend who had watched closely sent a short message. The message did not try to convince or confess. It simply matched your stride. Type Amen to get blessing 333 today. A late train rolled into the station and carried your story between towns. People you had never met held the details like warm bread. They tore off pieces and shared without waste. In one carriage, a man remembered when he had mocked the ambition of a colleague. He softened his tongue and decided to correct himself starting now. Your story gave him practical tools instead of slogans. In another carriage, a woman checked the lock on her resolve and found it solid. She had stored doubt in that locker for years. Tonight she left the locker open and walked away lighter. Across the aisle, a child watched a field take on the color of sky. She did not know your name, but she knew the sound the world makes when someone keeps going. She slept well. Type Amen 333 get blessing. Their friends were shocked by you, and the shock did not spoil into resentment. It matured into respect that learned to speak without a tremor. The respect took off its coat and planned to stay. They replayed your calm, the way it absorbed chaos like a sponge that leaves the table dry. They replayed the steadiness, the way it turned sharp corners into curves. They replayed the moment you chose depth over noise, and depth won. They learned that underestimation is a tax paid by the impatient. They learned that patience is not waiting, it is building without an audience. They learned that you built. A message went around with pictures of the before and after. The after did not gloat. It just breathed. Type Amen for blessing 333 right now. At a quiet hour, the river wrote your progress in ripples. A lamp on the bridge read every line and nodded at each clause. The water carried a rumor of morning even before dawn stood up. On the steps by the museum, a security guard thought about your decision to move in silence. He admired how you placed each brick with your own hands. He made a plan to finish his own degree. The cafe that once played too loud turned the music down on purpose. The barista poured steady, and the foam mapped a coastline. On that coastline, a lighthouse pulsed at the tempo of your resolve. The city drafted a small proclamation in the language of small mercies. Doors opened with fewer squeaks. Elevators arrived on time. Type Amen 333 to accept blessing.